Hello, and welcome to another edition of Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Seth Grove of the 196th District in York County. When someone says State Government Committee, it may not bring to mind anything controversial, but the truth is the Pennsylvania House State Government Committee is a starting point for some of the most hot-button issues in the state. The committee has dealt with and will be considering legislation on issues like illegal immigration, voter identification, and reducing the size of the legislature. Joining me today to highlight some of these issues is the chairman of the committee, Representative Daryl Metcalfe from Butler County. Chairman, thank you so much for joining me today.
Seth.
Appreciate it.
Good to join you.
Before we get into legal immigration, voter ID, and reducing the size of the legislature, let's hit on the hot topic right now, which is redistricting.
Right.
Obviously, the State Government Committee is in charge of congressional redistricting, which went through, and I think we put together an excellent plan that meets the constitutional and statutory guidelines of what's spelled out under case law.
That's correct.
We also have the Legislative Apportionment Commission, which does the House and Senate, and which sent it to the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they kicked it back to us, citing we now need to take into consideration geography more so than population, and reverting us back to 2001 House seats and Senate seats, which are unconstitutional because we have a requirement to redo them. Just to get your perspective on that, having been the forefront of redistricting.
Well, that's what I think it's very evident in the court's opinion, that they're out to set new precedents. That I think it was obvious from the work that was done that the 2011 maps were better even than the 2001 maps. And I believe the court even recognized that, the majority of the court, in their opinion, at the same time as setting aside 40 years of precedents and trying to blaze a trail with new precedents that totally creates chaos for this year's election process. It's just, it was unbelievable, I think, for a lot of us to see a 4-3 decision where the Chief Justice joined with 3 Democrats in what looked like a very partisan move. And I think, once again, it points to the need for reform in our courts. So often, when you see decisions being made and you see judicial activism where judges are making law from the bench rather than applying the law that we've already made, people recognize that across the Commonwealth, across the country, that we need court reform. But this type of a decision that creates so much chaos in the election process for the people to elect their representatives, their senators, for the next term of office really should point back to the fact that we as a legislature need to address court reform in a very substantive manner. And we need to start utilizing the impeachment of judges more often. I think that's our only recourse for really taking a judge out of the system that's not ruling according to the law and the Constitution and imposing their own thoughts, their own opinions, because they get to wear a black robe. And so often the legislature has allowed themselves to be weakened by the courts and have laws overturned that the people would support and the people want, that their elected voices are passing, that the governor is signing, and then you have judges coming in through the use of their gavel, through the use of the black robe, and undoing the people's voice.
I think it was highlighted during the 2005 pay raise repeal. The courts came down and said it is unconstitutional for you to repeal our pay raise, but everybody else's will be repealed.
That's correct.
I think it just showed exactly where the court is at these days, and we definitely need to open it up and look at them.
At that time, when we repealed the pay raise of 2005, that was broadly applied when it was passed to all 3 branches of state government. And it was very clear, and it's very clear in the Constitution, that if we do something broad-based, then the courts can be included in that. So in a broad-based manner, within 6 months, we repealed that pay raise. They went into a law that had been repealed, cherry-picked out their pay raise, and kept it. And then we had to come back and pass another law so they wouldn't continue to get cost of living allowances increases, which when this all happened, that's what one of my constituents back home had said, well, maybe it's because you didn't allow them to keep their pay raise. And those kinds of thoughts run across people's minds. I mean, what is in it for these judges to turn around and create this kind of chaos and to throw out 40 years of precedents?
Yeah, especially when we're dealing with redistricting, we have constitutional Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court cases coming down on us too, that inherently focus on population. Obviously, our state constitution takes in consideration geographical issues, but when you come down to it, we're now going to be sacrificing that one person, one vote population guidance to more of a geography based.
Well, and that's what's happened in my district personally. My district's about 9,000 people more than it should be based on the 2001 numbers. So it's not just one person, one vote.
Yeah.
We're going to have discrepancies between districts of thousands of people.
Yeah, it's very unfair. All right, hopefully we can get this straightened out and get the courts to start looking at their actual constitutional duties. But another issue we deal with on an ongoing basis is because of the lack of the federal government. Generally, I think the federal government gets in our way 100% of the time.
Right.
If we didn't have them interfering in state and local business, we'd have more cost-effective measures. We'd have smaller state and local governments, less tax burden, and the ability to actually do what we need to do as state legislators. And one issue is illegal immigration. With the federal government completely lacking in any policy whatsoever, so the states have to start moving legislation to protect our taxpayers and ensure our state dollars, local dollars actually go to the people that they need to go to,
That's
actual
correct.
citizens. You've been on the forefront of this issue nationally. We've also done a great job in the state government committee of moving this issue through state legislation. Can you just touch on a couple of things we've done in state government, specifically in our committee, to address this issue?
Yeah, over the years that I've been working on the issue that's facing our state as far as illegal immigration, the negative impact that it's having on our citizens, estimated 140,000 illegals in Pennsylvania. Estimated cost to Pennsylvania state taxpayers annually, $1.4 billion, $1.4 billion. So a significant cost to us, especially when you're operating a current deficit of about $500 million in this current year's budget. So we need to address that to protect our taxpayers, but more importantly, we need to address it to protect our citizens against illegal aliens that are here committing crimes. We've had crimes from rape to murder to identity theft against Pennsylvanians across the state. And you can't put a dollar figure on any one of those crimes when they impact that person, when they impact that person's family. So we need to address this issue. The feds have been AWOL in addressing it for decades. Both administrations, Republican and Democrat, Congresses, whether they've been controlled by Republican or Democrat, they failed to actually protect the people. And it's time for us as state legislators to step up. And that's why we created State Legislators for LegalImmigration.com many years ago, to try and bring state legislators together to stand on this issue. In Pennsylvania, we introduced a package of bills called National Security Begins at Home. It's a package of about 15 different bills. We even have some Senate bills included in that. We've seen the Senate introduce more bills the last couple of sessions on this issue. We've passed about a half a dozen bills out of the Pennsylvania House State Government Committee, bills that deal with benefits to try and ensure that illegal aliens don't tap our public benefits, to deal with jobs, that illegal aliens are not stealing jobs from Pennsylvanians when it's a job that especially is being provided based on a contract that the state has entered into with an employer. We've got a law that we passed to deal with the human smuggling, the human trafficking aspect, to do that when people are doing that for commercial profit, to empower our law enforcement to start actually cataloging illegal aliens when they're arresting them, so we can quantify the problem. We have legislation to go after the sanctuary cities that are trying to provide safe harbor to illegal aliens in violation of federal law. So we have a lot of good bills that we've passed out of the committee, even including a bill that would crack down on somebody and take their professional license away if they're caught employing illegal aliens. And we passed that out of the House to the Senate. So we have a number of bills still in committee. We've passed about half a dozen. We're hoping to see floor action on those very shortly.
Yeah, it's very exciting to actually take on these issues that the federal government fails to do. I mean, we look at the welfare reform we're trying to do. We can only go so far until we get pushback from the federal government, because there's certain guidelines we need to meet. I'm really hopeful that with a new administration, hopefully in the White House, with a new direction, Congress will actually take up these issues so we don't need to do their jobs for them at the state level.
Well, Congress should be protecting our borders, should be protecting our citizens from foreign nationals who are here illegally committing crimes against our citizens. And whether they're committing a violent crime or a crime against somebody personally, as identity theft is, they are committing crimes in our economy daily just to remain here. They violate our transportation laws, our insurance laws, our labor laws, one law after another. You cannot exist legally in this economy without violating one law, or you cannot exist illegally in this economy without violating one law after another, which is what they're doing. There are no there are no innocent illegal aliens. They all commit crimes to stay here.
Yeah.
And we need to ensure that our laws will protect our citizens. And the federal government should be doing it, but since they aren't, we need to make sure we are.
Yeah. And it's ironic that the first act coming to the United States is violating our laws to come here illegally. So from the get-go, they violate our laws by not caring exactly what we think. And, you know, it shows how wonderful the United States is. We are one of the most freest countries that have ever existed in the history of our world. It is a wonderful place to come to raise, but we have a process to do that. If you can't follow those guidelines to begin with and come over here illegally, who's to say you're not going to continue to breaking those laws when you
that's correct.
when you come here?
Land of the free, home of the brave, the greatest nation in the world, the nation that most protects individual freedom under our Constitution, a nation that is run by the rule of law, not by personalities, or at least it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have the rule of law in the United States of America. We're supposed to ensure that nobody is above the law, and especially those who are foreign nationals invading our country illegally should not be above the rule of law. And the current administration in the White House is certainly looking the other way and facilitating their breaking the law. They put, I think it was about 300,000 cases on hold, deportation cases, that in a sense tells illegal aliens, hey, we're not going to try and deport you unless you're committing some violent crime. And that's not right. Somebody who's here illegally, if they're stealing someone's job, it's still impacting that American family.
Yeah, great. Hopefully we can continue working on this issue and get some good legislative policy enacted into law to just help curb this, protect taxpayers' money, and protect Pennsylvania jobs here in Pennsylvania. Appreciate your national leadership on the issue as well.
Thank you for your work on it. I appreciated your work on the committee as a secretary of our committee to actually help me to move these bills through, because without your work, as you know, we get into some pretty contentious debates. It's important to have a member that is as strong as you are and have been in the process to helping us to facilitate the movement. So I appreciate your work and your leadership there in the committee.
I appreciate that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll discuss voter identification and reducing the size of the legislature, which seems to be pretty popular, you know, being able to fire our colleagues and ourselves. So we'll return in one moment.
Did you know that the state capitol is not only the epicenter of the Commonwealth's governing bodies, but was once home to 390 preserved Civil War flags? During the war, it was customary for each state to furnish their regiments in battle with flags representing their contribution to the Union Army. After the war, Pennsylvania's military department was responsible for collecting the flags, and in 1872, they were reverently housed in the Capitol. Following the completion of construction on the new Capitol building in 1914, the Civil War flags were moved to the Capitol Rotunda. They were kept untouched in custom-made flag cases until 1982, when the Capitol Preservation Committee initiated its Save the Flags project. Throughout the years, dust and long-term vertical display of the flags had begun to devastate the brittle silk fabric and painted designs. The flags were removed by local textile conservators and were repaired and preserved in storage units that protect the relics from light, dust, and excessive handling. Now you know.
Did you know the Avenue of Flags presentation at Indiantown Gap National Cemetery has over 500 casket flags? Among the flags displayed are Commonwealth, territorial, and military flags. The flags are tied to 20-foot poles spaced 40 feet apart on both sides of the main drive of the cemetery. It takes about 2 hours to set up and take down all of the flags. Volunteers are encouraged to help with this task and must be at least 13 years of age. All of the flags are donated to the Avenue of Flags by families of the deceased. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Seth Grove. Today's topic includes a number of important issues working their way through the State Government Committee. My guest is Chairman of that committee, Representative Daryl Metcalfe. We just kind of went through illegal immigration and obviously redistricting. Another hot topic is voter identification.
Right.
Now, we currently do have voter ID required for first-time voters. I believe the General Assembly a few years ago tried to get a full voter ID bill. Governor Rendell then at the time pushed back and we got it for first-time voters. Now we have a bill which we passed out of State Government Committee, passed by the House and sitting over in the Senate. It is teed up ready to go in the Senate to come back, but they have not yet released it to date. That would require identification for everybody going into the polling place. Obviously, I support it. I think it's a good measure. I had a constituent who told me that we'll never get it done because it's common sense, which is kind of ironic.
Sad but true in a lot of different issues that we address.
It is. But the legislation would require voter identification for every individual going to the poll to protect the sanctity of the vote. Proponents of the bill obviously argue that way. Opponents say it disenfranchises voters. Which I beg to differ because we're actually allowing individuals to get free identification if they do not have it. And obviously, we require first-time voters. Why do we need this legislation? Why is it important to protect the sanctity of the vote?
I think the disenfranchisement is occurring right now for law-abiding citizens who believe that their government should react to their wishes and that they should be able to impose their will on their government by casting that vote, and that they believe that in many instances their vote and the integrity of the system that takes their vote into consideration is lacking. That we need more integrity in that system, that you shouldn't have to fear that somebody down the street might be casting 2 or 3 votes. You shouldn't have to fear that Acorn is filing thousands of registration forms for fictitious individuals in Philadelphia, as they were caught doing. You shouldn't have to worry about the voter fraud that was being perpetrated in Pittsburgh by Acorn employees who were prosecuted, successfully prosecuted in Pittsburgh just a short couple of years ago, or a few years ago. So there's fraud. We know there's fraud. Pennsylvania has been plagued by voter fraud over the years, from the early 1900s right up to as recent as within the last few years. So we need to ensure that the sanctity of the vote is protected, as you said, that when someone casts a vote, that they're not being disenfranchised by a fraudulently cast vote that's undermining their will for the way their government should go, which is why we need to have voter ID. It's just common sense. Most everybody has an ID, a photo ID. That's what we're calling for. When you show up to vote, just to show your photo ID that you are who you claim to be before you cast that most important vote that you will cast as a citizen. That's both your right, but also has a responsibility with it to ensure that it's done by the individual that's claiming to be that person.
Yeah. There's an independent filmmaker that was in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire has the same system as we do. You go up, you state your name, and then you have to sign something. There's obviously, if you voted before, you don't need to show any form of ID. Now, he went up and just said, Seth Grove, is Seth Grove registered to vote here? And they pulled up and said yes, and started going through the entire election process to allow him to vote. And he said, do I need to show my ID? And they said, no, you've already voted here. You don't need to. So anybody in Pennsylvania can go through that same process of walking in and saying, I'm Seth Grove, I'm here to vote. If those individual poll workers do not know who you are, all you have to do is sign your name and get your little card and walk over and vote, and now you can vote for them. I think on the House floor, one of our colleagues from Bucks County actually told a wonderful story when he was running for a township supervisor. He went in to vote and found out he already voted. Yeah.
I thought that was one of the most powerful testimonies within the debate from a member of the legislature that had stated that while a sitting supervisor and known by people in that township, and I think he was running for state rep at the time, where he would be leaving township supervisor and becoming a state representative, and went in to vote and was told, you've already voted, and had to dispute that to actually have a process to occur so he could actually cast his vote legally, because somebody had actually signed his name in and voted in his place. It wasn't like a mistake and somebody signed on the wrong line. Somebody signed in for him and voted on his behalf. And it shows just what kind of a problem we have when somebody that's a known member of the community somebody can vote in their place. And that's why it's so important to have photo ID and to make sure that those judges of elections, that those workers at the poll that are facilitating the process for all of us and doing such a good job at trying to ensure that we have an election, that election occurs with integrity.
Yeah, and I can't discount the work ethic of our poll workers, because
Right.
I have no doubt if I know them, I'm there every election at mine. They know who Seth Grove is. If somebody else would try to be me, I know they would stop them. But unfortunately, if I'm someone who is not a frequent voter, I've already voted, they don't have a tool to stop that person from violating and trying to scam the election system. They don't have those tools in place. So this gives those workers a tool to stop it before it even happens.
Well, that's it. When somebody comes in to vote, you want them to show ID. If you go cash a check, you have to show ID. If you go get a library card, you have to show ID to get the library card. If you get on a plane, you have to show ID. If you drive your car, you have to have photo ID. So, I mean, it's just common sense that when you cast that vote and you exercise that most important right, that you take that responsibility in the process to prove that you are who you say you are.
Yeah, it's just common sense. Hopefully we can get it done and help protect.
I think we've had some good movement. As you said, out of the House to the Senate. It's moved through the State Government Committee in the Senate. We're now waiting for it to move through appropriations in the Senate and through the full Senate. Hopefully come back to us because it has some additional measures that are being put in to address voter fraud in the way of absentee voters, and also some other measures that were put in, changed a little bit from how we address it, but it's still a very strong law that we hope to have on the governor's desk this year.
And because of federal law, if this would pass, if you would show up to vote and you don't have your ID with you, you can actually file a provisional ballot.
Right.
And still have a vote, and then just come back and prove your identification at a later time. So there's protections in this law. Not to mention, if you don't have an ID, you can go to your local PennDOT. This law would provide for a non-photo ID, so you can go vote.
But we don't want anyone who is a law-abiding citizen that wants to cast their vote to be prevented from doing so. That's not what this is being introduced for. This is being introduced to ensure that when that law-abiding citizen casts their vote, it's not being disenfranchised by somebody who's casting a fraudulent vote.
Yeah, excellent. Let's go with our last topic, reducing the size of the legislature. Has been tried before, hasn't happened. Obviously, you've held hearings on it. We had a vote passed, actually bipartisan, out of the State Government Committee. It is a constitutional amendment. It would require it passing 2 sessions and then being given to the voters to say, do you want your House of Representatives to go from 203 members to 153 members, championed by Speaker of the House, Sam Smith. Just a great piece of legislation. What's your take on this?
I think this is an excellent opportunity for the Pennsylvania House of Representatives to show the people that we are going to lead by example. The cost savings will be millions if we're successful in doing this, which I think we have more momentum and the ability, a better ability to do this, a better shot at doing it than we've ever had. It just addresses the House size, so the Senate shouldn't really have any problem with passing it once we pass it through the House. The Speaker is the prime sponsor, so it should certainly get a House vote on the floor. And as you said, we did receive some Democratic support in committee, so we should see bipartisan support on the floor, and I think ultimately we'll see it pass and be sent to the Senate. Then it needs to be passed by the Senate, and then we'll have to reintroduce next session and go through the same process so that the voters can have their say and take a chance or take that opportunity to vote and say whether or not they want to see their House of Representatives reduced from 203 to 153, about a 25% reduction. And personally, I like the fact that we are setting an example through this vote, through this legislation, to say we believe that we can and should reduce the size of our body, but then afterwards I'm going to be pointing to the executive and the judiciary, especially the executive that spends billions and billions of dollars. So there's an opportunity to save millions by reducing the legislature by 25%, but there's an opportunity to save billions by reducing the executive branch by 25%, and the courts have 4 times approximately the number of judges as you have legislators in Pennsylvania. The salaries are a lot higher than that of legislators. So there's opportunities for savings in the courts also to ensure that those judges are actually working a 40-hour week like the taxpayers have to do out there, rather than having so many judges that they're bloating the court system and they're really not working to the full capacity of what they should be as a judge who's supposed to be a public servant.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I know a lot of feedback from my constituents is very positive. And I think it shows exactly where we're at and where we're leading as a Republican House caucus, that we're willing to sacrifice our own jobs in order to benefit the taxpayers and the residents of Pennsylvania. Obviously, it will take effect during the next redistricting. If we're both still here, we might have just moved ourselves out of a job, but you know what? I think it's worthy of us to put everybody, the entire state of Pennsylvania, above ourselves in order to make it more fiscally sound.
I agree with you, 100%.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have no more time for today's program. Love to get you back, because I know we're going to be talking about some hot button topics. Hopefully, pension reform, spending reform, the whole 9 yards.
Be glad to come back anytime. And once again, thank you for your leadership on the State Government Committee.
Yeah. Love your leadership too, Chairman. You're a true asset to the House caucus, and a great position in the State Government Committee to help move that very wonderful, taxpayer-friendly agenda into the forefront. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I'm State Representative Seth Grove. If you need any assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office or through my website. That information will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for a Legislative Report.